Good evening and welcome to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, LGBTQ plus community conversation with Maryland State Superintendent of Public Schools, Mohammed Choudhury. I am Jeremy LaMaster. My pronouns are he and they. I am the Executive Director for State Justice, Maryland's LGBTQ plus advocates, and I will be serving as the facilitator this evening. It's my pleasure to welcome Superintendent Mohammed Choudhury and our community conversation participants to this conversation this evening. As many of us celebrate LGBTQ plus Pride Month in June to honor the 1969 Stonewall Uprisings, we really sort of want to honor this turning point in LGBTQ plus civil rights movement and acknowledge that many in the LGBTQ plus community are still experiencing stress, fear, and increasing levels of discrimination, both locally and on a national level. In this context, the conversation this evening is even more important. While the LGBTQ plus community is incredibly diverse with a range of experiences, there are consistent and measurable trends that are of concern. More youth are identifying as LGBTQ and a range of other identities at younger ages. Our latest GLSEN National School Climate Survey found that nearly all student respondents heard anti-LGBTQ plus remarks at school, and that specific school-based supports were not necessarily as safe or inclusive as they would like. Tonight, we will hear from many LGBTQ plus students here in Maryland about their firsthand experiences in schools. And most importantly, we will learn from them about solutions, including their ideas for how we can provide better support to all students across the state. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few expectations and housekeeping items. We are live streaming this conversation on YouTube from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you are viewing on the live stream, you can use the chat to make comments throughout the evening. As a reminder, this meeting will be live streamed and recorded, so your participation implies consent to be recorded. Some of our participants have chosen to use a pseudonym and or remain off camera during this discussion to protect their privacy. When you're not speaking, please make sure to stay muted and use the chat function if you are running short on time, and if there are any additional comments you would like to add. Now we will hear from Superintendent Choudhury for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for making time to hang out with me this evening. I really appreciate you guys making the time, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Today is just really about listening to you, and I tell everyone, speak your truth, right? What has been your experience? It says in your classroom, in your school system, what's working, what's not working, and how can we get better? I'll just put it simply, Maryland Public School is for everyone, no matter who they are, where they are in their journey, who they love. And you have my commitment to make that MSD will ensure that that's the case. And we will make sure that's the case, both in a supportive way. And if it has to be enforced, then I will not hesitate to make sure that is enforced as well, with my colleagues at the State Board of Education, to make sure that you can be who you are and wherever you are in your journey when it comes to that. And that is very important. I know that's not the case, and that doesn't feel like that in every school. In every school system. And I think that's where we need to get better. And I really need your help in terms of how we can make that happen. What kinds of things can the department do, both in policy, both in support, both in resources, both in spaces for that. That's what today's really about. And so even if you just share your personal story, in it is a policy implication. And so I want you to remember, as the state superintendent, I live in the world of policy, right? I live in the world of both resource allocation and also policy. And so when you give a suggestion today, think about what that could look like at scale, right? Across our 1,400 schools, our 24 systems. And then of course there's public schools and non-public schools, and then early childhood centers as well. MSDE has a big responsibility along with the State Board of Education. So that's the one bit that I always ask. And if I ask a follow-up question, what I'm trying to get at is, what would that look like, right? If it became a program, or if it became an initiative, or if it became a law, or if it became a policy. So I want to just push you on that when you are sharing. And with that, Jeremy, I'm I'm excited. And so let's jump right in. Again, don't forget to speak your truth, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. I really appreciate the opportunity. Now we would like to meet our participants. I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves by stating your first name, your pronouns if you're comfortable, and the county that you are heralding from as well if you are comfortable. Again, just as a reminder, some of our participants will remain off camera and may use a pseudonym to protect privacy. And for those of you that are on camera, we're great to see your faces. So I'll go ahead and just start off, kick it over to HB.
Hi, I'm HB. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm representing Howard County.
Parker.
Hi, I'm Parker. My pronouns are they, and I'm representing Anne Arundel County.
Michaela.
Hi, my name is Michaela. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm representing Harford County.
Mira.
Hi, I'm Mira, and my pronouns are she, they, and I'm representing Harford County.
Alvaro.
Hi, my name is Alvaro, and I'm from Prince George's County, and my pronouns are he, him.
Oliver.
Hi, my name's Oliver. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm representing Carroll County.
Jaden.
Good evening, I'm Jaden. I reside in Anne Arundel County and I use he, they pronouns.
Vinny.
Hi, I'm Vinny. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm representing Wacomico County.
Delaney.
Hi, my name is Delaney, and I am representing Washington County, and my pronouns are she and they.
And then Zai. Please correct me if I'm mispronouncing.
It's Z. Hi, I'm Z. I go by any pronouns, and I'm representing Anne Arundel County.
Thank you, Z. I apologize. Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew Dietrich. I'm from Howard County, and my pronouns are he, they.
Ari.
Hi, my name's Ari. I go by she, her, and I'm representing Prince George's County.
Roa. Is Alejandra with us? And I know Jay might be joining late, but is Jay with us?
I'm right here. I'm Jay. My pronouns are he, they, and it, and I'm representing Howard County.
All right, thank you all for the introductions. As we transition into our questions, we're looking forward to rich and robust conversation about your experiences, your ideas for better supporting LGBTQ youth in schools. We want you to be as open and honest as possible. So we ask that you make sure to share stories, but not names of your specific schools or specific staff members or other students who might be involved. It's really important that we are respectful of people's privacy while allowing us to really talk about these important issues. Each participant has sort of chosen questions that are most important to them tonight to discuss. So we will be calling on a few of you for those specific questions to make sure everyone is able to share. For those of you on YouTube, please share your thoughts on the questions in the chat. So with that, our first question is really focusing on our current sort of discussion on both local and national news related to issues and policies that impact the LGBTQ plus community at large, as well as policies impacting LGBTQ youth specifically. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about how some of these local and national news issues and stories are impacting you. So HB, do you want to go ahead and start off?
Sure. Okay, so I'm trans, female to male, and I'm in this constant state of worrying if I'm gonna have rights and if I'm gonna be protected in and outside of school. And I really just want to make sure that people, especially like LGBTQ people, know their rights and that they aren't like going away, because with the Roe v. Wade getting overturned, that can cause a lot of domino effects for LGBTQ rights, and so I just want that to stay good in Maryland.
And Mira.
So yeah, again with like the Roe v. Wade stuff, like although it doesn't really affect us as much in Maryland, but it's still really scary to think about because like now it's real and it's happening, and it not only like affects women, but it also affects non-binary people and like transgender men. And like there's so many things that could like happen just from one thing being overturned, and it's just really scary to think about.
Yeah, so definitely hearing, some of the fear and anxiety that a lot of what's going on is causing. Alvaro, anything else?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to like issues and policies, I definitely echo everyone's concern when it comes to federal laws. But I also think it impacts us on more of a local level when it comes to like elections, local elections, like county council, board of education, or even like the upcoming governor election. I think all these things will put forth candidates that either will put forth policies or bills that will support people of the community or either deter them. And I think that it's important for us as a community to understand that basis and to understand that it's important for us to get out there, to get involved and try to put the candidate who you know is going to want to represent you in the best way, who has your best interest in heart. And so, yeah, I mean, when it comes to LGBTQ community, policies and issues always come up, but it's important for us to understand that it will impact us in the long run, whether we think so or not, and to not be afraid to speak out or push a candidate who you think is going to represent you best.
Yeah, thank you, Alvaro, for shouting out the importance of these local elections and really the need to know where everyone stands on some of these issues from local to this sort of statewide levels. Oliver, any comments?
So in terms of policies that have been passed already in Maryland, I'm from Carroll County, where our school board has actually just banned pride flags on school property. They did it purposefully before our summer break, which also happened to be during Pride Month, I believe, in hopes that we would forget about it over the summer, and nobody is going to. And there was also a school board meeting, and I will not name any of the specific members of the board of Carroll County, but there was someone on the board who, when we called to attention the issues that we were facing when they were just talking about passing this, suggested, in her words, asking if we needed to go back to segregation to get all of us to stop. Those are her words. You can find it. I will not name her, but that's the school board that my county is currently under. And it's just really insane to me that they banned pride flags in our county just for no reason. They're deeming them as political flags as well. And it's unfair because a lot of the other counties in Maryland have pride celebrations. I know of a county that had a pride week, which is awesome to hear about. It extended all the way down to elementary school. And Carroll County just does not have that support in any way, shape, or form. And we really need help to fight what the school board has done to us, because we're not even trying to change a policy. We just need that policy that they forced upon us taken away so that we can have our basic rights back to self-expression, because there's gay kids, there's gay teachers that no longer can express themselves safely. Teachers can't mark themselves as a safe space for students. And it's just all around a really horrible issue that we're facing right now.
I know, Oliver, thank you for sharing. And I know how hard those school board meetings have been. I've been to a few of them myself. And, I definitely agree. It's alarming and of concern. Jaden, I saw your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I, like Superintendent Choudhury, I kind of live in the mind of policy as well. It's one of my interests. So looking at COMAR, I believe the State Board of Education has authority to issue regulations, which will then leave it to local Board of Education to have to develop their own regulations and policy and regulations. So to kind of put the superintendent on the spot, is there any way for the Maryland State Board of Education to issue a policy or COMAR regulation, for instance, on flags in the sense in Carroll County, but also I'm from Anne Arundel County, and last year in June during Pride Month, we actually, I believe we're the only local education agency in the state of Maryland that has a specific policy and accompanying regulations that protects all students, including our LGBTQ plus students, basically codifying the right to be addressed by our preferred name and our preferred pronouns.
So I like to cut in sometimes. So you can promulgate regulations on pretty much anything, but ultimately you got to pass it, right? And so just like you have a board, I have a board, and they're also of varying personalities and varying views. You know, it's unfortunate that the pride flag has been deemed a political flag. Ultimately, the legal framework that was used is the notion of politics. And when clearly this, you know, has nothing to do with politics, it is about of who people are and expressing that. But it was done in the auspices of that. So, you know, as you guys know, legal frameworks and how that worked, like that's ultimately that's the line we ultimately have to determine, right? Did it violate something that is explicitly a clear violation of that fits, like in this case, like discrimination, right, of a student group, a protected class, or does it fall under politics? And so that's the piece around this. Ultimately, people can file complaints to the State Board of Education, and they are obligated to review that complaint. And so know that, like, people, constituents can file complaints and say, hey, I would like this reviewed. I do not think it is, I think it's illegal. And the State Board is obligated in that process with the department to review it. And so, so if you feel that that has happened, right, then that process needs to happen. We can't just go in and say, hey, this has happened, unless it's like a blatant, very clear. And I am not trying to say that, you know, it is a political thing, the political under the auspices of a political flag. That is unfortunate, but they essentially did that for like any type of flag that is not, say, the United States flag, right? And so, but you can promulgate regs on anything. Passing them are a different topic, right? And so I can't speak for 15 board members today and say they are going to pass this. However, anything that is a clear discrimination or infringement of your ability to, you know, be who you are, or if you feel like that is happening, then yeah, that needs to be filed, and then that needs to be investigated, and then there are consequences doled out as a result of that. As you know, the Federal Department of Ed is redoing their Title IX regulations. It's in a massive comment period right now, and that's going to have major implications for athletics and sports and what that looks like. And you know, that fight is happening right now, and different states are taking different approach. I'm just coming from spending almost a decade in Texas. Very, very different. Originally from California. Cannot have talked about two different places. And so yes, so regs can be promulgated. I can't tell you we're promulgating regs on this issue because that it hasn't been a thing that we've thought about. There needs to be regulations. There are regulations about ensuring students who are protected classes, regardless of race, disability, gender, sexuality, right? That is in law. Those things do exist. And if that's being violated and it's clear, then complaints can be filed and we investigate that, and we ultimately determine what needs to happen. So I want you to know that piece. I think a lot of people don't know that component of the state board can investigate and look at things, but we have to get the formal complaint. So hopefully that's helpful, Jaden.
Thank you, Superintendent. And Michaela, I'll go ahead and let you also chime in here too as well.
Well, I just wanted to say that so a way that this kind of can impact, like, we had an incident similar to this in Harford County. A teacher came to one of the schools wearing a pride flag. She was going down the hallway with her pride flag, and a student recorded it. It got into the wrong hands. It got on the internet, and eventually this teacher started to get death threats, and she was being harassed. And I guess I do have a question about, and that's how it kind of like can impact. I guess my question is like, how could, and like this happens to students too, they're harassed at school because of like these news policies, because people hear it from their parents and they'll hear that it's bad, and so they'll go and they'll harass students. And so I guess I have a question, and it's what like type of policies could you do to help protect these students, because the way it's handled, at least for me, it's handled like normal bullying, but it's not, because there's an element of hate to it. So my question is, what policies do we have in place, or what policies can we create to help this situation?
No, I think those are very good points. Every school system must have bullying and anti-discrimination policies in the books. They must adopt those, right? We just recently put forth a model bullying policy and what that looks like. And then school systems are supposed to take that. Some things are statutorily obligated, meaning that Annapolis has decided that this is what must be in there. And then some things are guidance. Hey, if you go above and beyond what statutory is required, this is a best practice. And so I would have to look at what your county's bullying policies look like. There needs to be a process for you to be able to file that complaint, to file that inquiry, and your school needs to be able to act on that. If that's not happening, then we have problems and issues, right? And I would hope that, and there should be a process to ultimately go up to the chain of command on that. And ultimately it can come to the state board, right? If your parent or guardian feels like that is happening at a certain level, or you feel like that's happening at that level, then you let, and nothing is being done, right? You truly feel your school system is not doing anything, then the next recourse could be at the state level, and then we would look into that issue in that manner, right? But we got to always take it case by case, right? And we got to take it by what has happened, what happened, and this and that. Not to deny your experience, but we have to kind of look through across everything in terms of that case, and then ultimately determine what happened or didn't happen. I always start with the school system. Every time, trust me, I get a lot of emails and inquiries. I start with the school system and say, hey, what's going on with this issue? What's going on? And sometimes it helps to not correct an issue and move faster. And sometimes I realize that, okay, you know what, this is what actually is going on, and that they're working on it. So it really depends on the circumstance, but you do have a recourse if you feel like your system is not doing a good job in tackling, especially issues related to bullying. We know from national trends and everything, we know there's already, COVID has really impacted people in different ways, but we also know when it comes to LGBTQI youth, like it's even more disproportional in terms of the impact that is happening. I mean, we know that it's a crisis within a crisis, and that's not okay. And so if policies are contributing to that, and your school system needs to respond to that. And if they're not, then your next recourse is at that state level. So.
Delaney, I saw your hand up as well for this question. We're still focusing on issues and policies that impact you all while you're in school.
So mine's sort of, it happened a while ago, and it actually happened to me. And strangely enough, what made it even more confusing is that this happened the last day of school, and I was with my girlfriend at the time. And there was somebody who said that gay people should be killed. And he also said if he had a gun, she and I would be the first to go. And we told our principal and vice principal about this, and nothing was done. And it was very disappointing and a letdown, because it was like our safety was was threatened, yet you do nothing. Because I mean, they talk to them, but they just let them go on about their day and nothing else. It wasn't like a sit down of what you did was very wrong and there are repercussions to even threatening this. And that was just very disappointing. And it made me see the world at a whole different angle, knowing that like even at school, even if it wasn't with actual, like an actual gun or weapon, it was like the words seemed to just shatter everything in sight.
Thank you so much, Delaney, for sharing. And, you know, your story is not alone. You know, this is something we've seen, you know, across the state in sort of anti-LGBTQ plus hate speech and violence. You know, and for me as well, you know, I'm curious, I think as many of you are, as to, you know, how is not just these issues responded to, but how are, you know, what is the sort of discipline or the restoration, right, or the education, you know, that kind of helps in countering, you know, this type of bias. Oliver, do you have a same on this point, and then we can move on to the next question?
I have a similar, like a story that happened to me in the school building. Is that all right?
Yes.
So this happened to me. This was a teacher. Well, not a teacher. This was an adult. In the lunch line, you have to put in your PIN number, and then you know, you get your lunch. And this year it was free due to COVID, so a lot more people were getting lunches. My legal name comes up when I put my PIN in because it's, you know, related to money and whatnot. And so every time I would just tell the lunch lady, hey, because, you know, she would like say your name to make sure. And I would always tell her before she said my name, like, you know, my name's Oliver. I don't go by that name. And most of the time that was fine. One day I put my PIN in before the person in front of me on accident. I thought he had already put his PIN in, and I requested, hey, can I step in front of you and explain to her I have a situation? He was like, sure, I don't care. And I went to try to talk to her, and I was like, hey, before I could even say anything, she yelled at me to get back in line. And I was like, okay, you know, I will, but I need to tell you something about my name. And I pointed to the screen. I said, this is me. I'm this human, but I don't go by that name. I go by Oliver. Because this year, after COVID ended, I came back to school. I wasn't transitioned before, and I was transitioned after, and I kind of went, my business is my business, and I'm not going to tell anybody. Unfortunately, she looked at the name, looked at me after hearing me say, you know, don't say this name, you know, I'm this person. She proceeded to yell across the entire lunchroom, or not the entire lunchroom, but at my high school, there's like a little room where you get your lunch, and then there's like a bigger room. So there were like 50 children in like a very small area. And she yelled my dead name at me across the entire like room that we're in. And I was like, no, that's not my name. I just told you. And she proceeded to continue to yell at me. And when I yelled back out of retaliation, she proceeded to tell me that I was disrespectful and that I needed to lower my tone. And it was a very upsetting situation. So I don't remember a lot of it, but I know that her and I were yelling at each other over an issue of her being discriminatory against me and also putting me in danger. And so at the very end of it, she just said, whatever, give her her lunch. And I go, oh, it's him. It's give him his lunch. That's the whole issue we're having here. And this woman looked me up and down and told the other lunch lady to give her her lunch after I had corrected her. And so I left, and I went into the principal's office, and I went into the guidance office, and was like, you know, this is discrimination. She got into a yelling match with a student. She was being disrespectful. She was disrespectful after I explained to her and corrected her multiple times. And it led to me reviewing the Safe Schools video on transgender youth. And I have notes of my own that would be edits to that and edits to creating a policy that can be distributed to all schools on how to handle transgender youth with respect. and how to treat them as they should be treated, how to not put them in danger, how to not embarrass them in front of their peers, because I was the talk of the school for a while. Teachers were discussing what happened between me and the lunch lady with their classes as a discussion. And while I hope it helped people, I didn't volunteer for that. I volunteered for this. I volunteered to tell my story, but I did not volunteer for teachers to be discussing whether I was in the right or the wrong with their students. From what I heard, most of the teachers did say that I was in the right, which thankfully, I guess, but I still didn't sign up for that. I wanted to be a little bit under the radar at the time, just as a newly transitioned person in Carroll County. And nothing, I requested an apology and I requested that she go through additional training, and I don't think it ever happened. And so I did let it go, even though I was offered a lawyer for the situation. But I think there needs to be some serious work done with how teachers are handling, teachers or any adult working in Maryland school district is handling trans youth. I think there needs to be a strict step-by-step guide to protect kids like me.
If there's resources or things that you have seen and places that you think serve as kind of model policies for things like this or references, please send them over so I can look at them. You said you had something, so definitely do. And you know, it's literally Mohammed.Choudhury and Maryland.gov.
Right.
And I do read everything. So if you have some things around that, that's helpful. I will tell you, I mean, I'm not even gonna even try to our teacher preparation programs and how teachers are being prepped. We don't, you know, we are still living in a world where things are, but we're not preparing teachers to handle issues that you just uncovered, especially on how to support transgender youth with positive, reaffirming learning environments. We are not, and that's not okay. Frankly, it's not okay. Period. But we also know adults are also still learning how to, be able to. Some adults are in denial about things like this,
right.
and so what would, I guess what I would ask you is, are you saying as we prepare new teachers in our state, we have to make sure that there's programming under, like when you talk about equity and you talk about issues of race, class, and right alongside that is also issues on how you support our transgender students as well with positive affirming learning environments.
Right. So I am aware that there is a video that everybody watches about a young trans man. And I think the video is great. It's a little outdated, but you know, it's good that it's there. I think we need to do some updating to those policies. Definitions have changed. The definition of gay, the definition of lesbian, those definitions have actually evolved since these were made. So it needs to be updated. It needs to be updated. I don't think we need to just take it all away and rebuild it, but it does need to be updated and current with the times. And I think that I had created myself a working kind of step-by-step instruction list. I think that there needs to just be more when it comes to trans youth, because being transgender is different than, like, your gender identity is different than your sexuality. We can all agree on that, but it's also different on how you handle a transgender person versus a gay, lesbian, or bisexual, or any other identity. There just needs to be more help for teachers so teachers can be more understanding, and there also has to be more, like, I don't want to use the word punishment, but I am stretching, like, trying to find a word for teachers who are discriminatory to their students. Like, you say that we have a no tolerance policy for bullying between students, but what about when a teacher is bullying a student for their identity, for any kind of thing? Like, that's absolutely unacceptable. School is somewhere that students go to feel loved and accepted. At least that's what we're trying to do here. And I'm not seeing it. I don't know if other people are seeing it. There are some great staff members and there are also some that are terrible. This needs to be fixed immediately, and there needs to be more specific instructions. This is what you do. This is what you have to do when you have this kind of student in order to make them feel safe and respected just like everybody else.
Well, you know, part of zero tolerance discipline policies, those are policies of the past, and they are harmful, and they were harmful to kids, especially from historically disadvantaged groups, and systems that are still using that. But what I would be interested in hearing from you, and sorry, Jeremy, this one I want to, so what would you, So say there was a policy and there's a what would you want the consequence be? Like, you know, I saw Jaden type in accountability. You can have a hammer and be like, you know, this is a thing that goes on your record. You know, when you are required to go to mandatory training.
That's what I would recommend,
Okay,
is just sensitivity training. That's what I recommended when I was first put in this situation. I told my principal that I was not asking for her to be fired. I was not asking for her to be in trouble, but she clearly needed more information to be more knowledgeable and understanding about the trans community, because I would like to believe that she wasn't doing it to hurt me and she was doing it because she didn't understand. So I think that what we need is a step-by-step guide for everybody, mandatory to view and to have in the classes it takes to become a worker in this community here. And also when a teacher or adult breaks that and isn't treating somebody, is discriminating against a student, that they need to have more classes. I mean, when you get in trouble, say for, you know, driving under the influence, what do? You go to classes. So what I'm thinking here is, what do we do with a teacher who is discriminating against students, not treating them with respect? More classes for them to be more understanding. And if they refuse to adapt to the coming times, then, and it becomes a repeat offense, then maybe that is the time to let that teacher go. But I'm not saying fire everybody immediately, like definitely try to be remedial and help them. But there are people who are not going to accept us for who we are, that are in the school system. And that's ridiculous. It's a new generation. Like, they have to be respectful or they have to get out.
No, and I agree with you on that. And I also agree with you on progressive restorative discipline. And so, as you said, you know, not going out and saying, hey, you're gone. But if you are ultimately not an adult, dare to teach and educate all children and all students, regardless of who they are and where they are, then public schools are not for you. Public schools are for everyone. And so I hear you loud and clear on that. And that's very helpful to know. The one piece, although I know you said you didn't sign up for it, and frankly, your incident should not have been become such a big deal where people are talking about it. But the one thing that you said is, most of my teachers knew I was in the right. That at least gives me some hope. And so I appreciate that piece.
Right. I've definitely had really positive experiences with my teachers being very understanding, especially on my first day, where I had to explain, hey, this person on the paper is not what you're going to have in class. And it is even in Carroll County, there are plenty of teachers, my principal even, are very receptive and understanding. I was able to get us several gender neutral bathrooms in my school. And I hope to, as another policy, I think that you should look into making sure all schools have a gender neutral bathroom, because when I first brought the topic up to my principal, he said, there's no room. And I said, what about that single stall bathroom? What about that single stall bathroom? Like, you know, there's, especially now that the nurse's office was kind of off limits due to COVID and whatnot, those single stall bathrooms that are in the offices for the teachers can easily be gender neutral and accessible to trans students. And also a lot of the worry is, well, what are kids going to be doing in single stall bathrooms? I have eyes. I can definitely see the people I go to school with, but these bathrooms are regulated in the office and under watch, and whether you have to apply and get like a key for it, it's time for all schools to have an accessible bathroom for trans kids and especially non-binary kids, which is why single stall, like male and female, definitely is enough. It has to be a gender neutral bathroom.
Thank you Jeremy for extending out that conversation.
And thank you, Oliver, for sharing everything that you did. You know, and just to echo, you know, you had asked earlier if you were alone in these experiences, and just wanted to kind of say that, you know, the answer is no. You know, when we at Free State did our own needs assessment in 2016, we found that of these sort of anti-bias or bullying incidents, up to a fifth of them were perpetrated by adults and you know, educators or other staff members. And so I think you bring up a great point, though, even in your story, that it wasn't necessarily the teacher. And so it's not just educators, but all government, you know, sort of, or public officials that are interfacing, especially with youth, right? No matter where they are in our system, do need to be prepared. And then the other thing you mentioned, Oliver, too, I liked was the updating or refreshing, that it's not a one and done training. There needs to be some level of every 1 to 2 years that folks are getting refreshers on these issues, on whatever the policies are. And I think more and more we're seeing some school systems do a lot better with, bystander intervention and sort of having other adults and other teachers and educators, like you mentioned, that are supportive, feeling like they themselves can know what the policies are and can help enforce policies and kind of help introduce accountability at that peer level, right? Where it's not on the students to have to advocate for themselves. So Michaela and Alvaro, I definitely see your hands. I'm just going to go into the next question because it's through the same thread and topic. And so definitely I want to get to other folks who haven't spoken first, and then definitely would love to hear what you have to say as well. So, my next question was going to be, do you feel safe in school? Why or why not? I think we have established that a lot of folks don't necessarily feel safe in schools. That being said, I think it might be interesting to hear, for some of you that do feel safe in schools, what is it about those spaces, or if at least are there spaces in your schools that feel safe, right? What is it that schools or staff can do to foster, safer spaces for LGBTQ plus students? And if you have any examples, or stories, kind of demonstrate that, that'd be helpful. And then the two, when it comes to the kind of bullying piece, and again, I don't want to say any success stories, but any sort of, experiences of what happened when you reported bullying, and either what happens or what is it that you wish had happened. So Ari, I'd like to actually start with you first.
Okay. I'm so sorry. Ask the question again. My brother.
No, you're great. I'll go ahead. Basically, the question is, what can schools and staff do to make environments safer for LGBTQ students?
I feel, as I believe it was Oliver saying, I do believe that punishments for teachers should become like more, excuse me, sorry. Overall, I just feel like teachers do not take things such as any form of homophobia and discrimination serious, or at least as serious as it should be. I feel like it's passed off as a joke sometimes. As me personally, I'm omnisexual. I've quite literally have had male students sexualize my sexuality in the classroom in front of teachers. And instead of the teacher pretty much reprimanding, it's pretty much just like, oh, boys being boys, or oh, like they didn't mean it, or the best I feel like I've gotten is I'll be like, oh, you need to apologize to her, and that's inappropriate. But I feel like it's not taken to the point of where it is, where it's actual harassment or even like discrimination. But I just feel like there needs to be better training for these types of situations. And yeah, that's my personal thoughts so far.
Jay, do you have something to share?
Yeah, I do. Quite frankly, I don't feel safe in school. Although I come from a very supportive family, I have family and friends that love me like a lot and support me a lot. And I even have teachers and people that I don't really know at school who support me. It's just the overall energy that I get from the school and from students that I'm not very well acquainted with. It's very negative and it makes me feel very ostracized, and it makes me feel like I'm not wanted there. Like, for example, so I have this one teacher at my school who never explicitly says anything that's transphobic or homophobic or anything that would discriminate against me or other queer students. But when I'm in her classroom, I do not feel like my identity or me as a person is respected and valid there. Not to mention the fact that even being queer in school is so difficult. Even if you're in a supportive school, there's going to be people who are just rude no matter what, and that's kind of just like the sad truth of it. And me being trans, and that definitely calls a lot of attention to myself. Walking in the halls, people will just like say stuff to me. It could be based on my appearance, or it could be something about like my gender or my sexuality. It doesn't really matter. If they find something that they deem is wrong with me, they'll say it and they'll try to make me feel bad about myself. but I don't know. It's really frustrating because I feel like school should be a place where people can not only get an education, but they can also feel like they're wanted and understood and valued there. And I'm very lucky that I have a supportive family and friends, because if I didn't, I don't really know what I would do at school, because all I can do is put myself in the place of somebody else who might not have what I have at home and with my friends. And I would just feel so let down by the school system and the environment.
Thank you for sharing, Jay. Matthew, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so I feel like Oliver brought up some amazing points that I kind of just want to reiterate. That training for teachers, I think, is the most important way, because I feel like a lot of teachers want to be there for LGBTQ students, but don't necessarily always have the resources or may not know how to deal with stressful situations. And there's only so much that LGBTQ students can say. Like, if you're like, hey, if you heard somebody say like a slur or say something that is just not appropriate, like teachers may not know how to go about a conversation, because if you come up in the front of the class and you're like, oh, like we don't do that in this room, and you make it like a lecture, it's more ostracizing for LGBTQ kids who feel like, oh, now they know that I said something, or they know that I talked about it. And that's just very like ostracizing and not the best way to go about that. And so if teachers knew, hey, like Oliver was saying, having a guide that says, hey, if somebody said something that was offensive, or somebody said something that was like hurtful to the LGBTQ community, here's how you go about it in the best way. Here's how, you make sure on the first day of school that the students in that class know that this is not a place where that kind of hatred is fostered or where it's accepted there. And so I think that having that guide that Oliver was talking about and having those trainings is very, very important, and should be something that all teachers have to go through multiple times. And so I think that most recently in Howard County, I had the opportunity to work on a professional development day, and record myself reading a part of like their training for that day, which was focused on LGBTQ youth. And you were able to give a personal experience with this thing that you were speaking on. And the teachers were required as part of their training in order to like understand a part of the experience for LGBTQ students in schools. So I think that that was incredibly helpful, that is always reiterated every year, that you have a day where you are learning how to be more accepting of LGBTQ youth from queer youth. So I think that that's very important. And I also I don't want to do too much, but I think that visual signs are also a great part for making sure that, when a student walks in and they see a pride flag, one of my teachers at my school hangs a pride flag in their classroom, and right when you enter that room that this is a space where hate is not allowed. And like all the classes have those like safe space. This is like a safe space on the door, but like it doesn't mean anything if that room is not safe. Like, yes, you can say that, I took this 1-day training where I got the safe space sticker, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not backed up, if it's not enforced. And I think that it's very important to have those conversations, even if it's the first day of school and you're like, hey, these are my expectations for my classroom, and specifically say, I will not be tolerating any hate against the LGBTQ community. And if I hear of anything like this, like these are the consequences. And so I think that starting off that way and making sure that it's a priority where LGBTQ people are respected and uplifted and affirmed, they have a much better time in their academic performance, with their mental health, and overall fosters a better safe space in that school. So those are a few things that I think are very, very important for specifically teachers and classrooms, that will make schools safer if they know that their teachers and their peers and their classrooms are safe. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Z?
Yeah, I wanted to speak on bullying reports. because there's a huge issue of people not reporting things. But I think that it gets used against students a lot, in the sense that when students do talk about their issues, the first response is always, well, did you report it? And part of the reason that people don't report things, and there's such an issue with that, is there's a lack of follow-up with victims. There's never like checking back in and letting them know that the situation has been addressed, the situation has been handled. And it's obviously has to do with like the factor of the privacy of the other students and the anonymity that comes with like the punishments, which is understandable. But the message that that brings across is that we value the privacy of offenders more than the safety of victims. And that is a huge discouraging factor in people reporting things. And that's coming from somebody that has reported so many things in the past school year. And like so many people I've talked to, like they're too scared to report things because they feel like nothing is being done. And for all they know, things are happening, but there's no follow-up with that. It's like they just kind of report something and then they fill it out and then it vanishes. And so a lot of times people will say, oh, well, nothing was done, but things might have been done. And even like a simple checking back in can actually make like a huge difference, but it's not implemented in our policy. It's not required and staff doesn't do it. And that causes this detachment between students and their administrations, because it means that students don't trust their administrations. They don't feel safe going to their administrations. They don't feel like their administrations have their back or care. And that is obviously like hugely important, because otherwise students are just facing this bullying over and over and over again and are keeping it to themselves and nothing is happening.
Thank you, Z, for sharing. And on the same topic too, I'm curious, Parker, if there's things you like to add as well.
So my thing was how I don't feel personally, I don't feel safe at school. I recently left the school system due to me not feeling safe. My thing was, even if you told people like teachers or administrators that you were being harassed, like I was being harassed and that's why I left. If you were being harassed, nothing would be done, even though the teachers it was just like they would report anything. I only trusted like 2 specific teachers, and nothing, like I told them and couldn't think of it because it had been something that happened while I wasn't in their classroom or while I didn't have them. And first, that logic kind of is weird to me, because it's like you should be able to report things, or they should have reported it if I told them, even if it wasn't recent. But like like the reporting thing, it's same thing at my school. You can report something and nothing will happen, or you won't get anything back. Like you won't get told if they talk to the person about it. Like they don't have to say what they talked about. It's just they talked about it and it was addressed. And as a trans man, I want the not feeling safe. I want to feel safe in locker rooms. That's a main thing for me, and bathrooms, because I have been threatened to get beaten up in the bathroom, and that caused me to stress out about things, and it led to my mental health, spiraling, and all that stuff, which caused me to leave in the middle of 10th grade year. This school year, I left and then finished the rest of the school year in homeschool. And I don't plan on going back because it's better for my mental health to not deal with harassment from mainly like the jockey cisgender men that think, oh, you're trans, you're not a real guy, like you belong in the boys' bathroom or boys' locker room. But like that's my main thing. And there were a few guys that were just like, oh, cool, you're trans, good for you, I guess. I don't really see any differently from how you represent, like you show yourself. kind of appreciate that fact, and the fact that I was allowed to even go into the men's restroom and the boys' locker room and just be treated like a boy. It was mainly the students made me not feel super safe, because the teachers were like super supportive. They wouldn't dead name me or misgender me because they had been told way before the start I wouldn't be going by my dead name and what my pronouns were, which is a big thing that I really appreciate my school for doing. But they just didn't they don't educate the students about LGBTQ youth, because like the one activity we did was your name and preferred pronouns for like a morning meeting thing in homeroom. And everyone that wasn't trans or like wasn't a part of the LGBTQ community complained and like groaned, which like kind of was weird to me, because like there are straight allies and like cis allies that I've met that will be like, my pronouns are such and such, you can refer to me as that. And like that's something I see a lot, but it was like weird seeing a bunch of kids that I've grown up like known since elementary school or middle school, like acting differently from how they acted, the way I remember them, at least, because I came out in middle school and everyone was super chill about it. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
No, thank you so much for Parker for sharing, and I'm so sorry that you had to leave your public school in order to feel safe and have a safe learning environment. And it definitely should not be that way. And I think you kind of bring up a good point too, that even with teachers' support, right, that doesn't change the fact, even if teachers are trained to respond to bullying, it doesn't necessarily stop bullying or prevent bullying from happening. And that we need to, it's not just enough to be free from bullying or violence. It's, LGBTQ plus students feeling like they belong and have a sense of community and belonging with their peers. And so I kind of like to kind of keep us moving, a little bit into that thread too, of like just a sense of belonging. What is it that could help, students fit in fit in, I don't think is the word I'm looking for, but to at least feel included or feel like they're in an inclusive environment. So Delaney, could you actually maybe talk a little bit on that?
Well, for the inclusive environment part, I can definitely relate to like the whole issues of having an inclusive environment, because that's always been a struggle for me. I've moved once to a new school when I moved to a different house, and when I got there, it was probably my worst nightmare, because these were people who were very close-minded, who were very discriminatory to anything that was different, who, if you didn't play baseball or if you didn't do soccer, it was like there's something wrong. It was like if somebody was not in the binary of the status quo of that school, it was like, you're a target now. And I'm an example of that. And one example I can give is like one of my teachers who, was a very good person, but not a very good ally in terms of protecting his students. I was experiencing with different pronouns and a different name. And students would make fun of that name and turn it to something else. And my teacher would go along with it. He would call me the same thing that the bullies would too. And it wasn't until not even a week, it spread all throughout school. And everybody was calling me this name. And I was the resident gay kid. And I wish I didn't feel entirely that way. that it was that bad, but it did. And when I got to my new school, it was like, these people are really nice, but they don't pay attention to the inclusion that we do provide. Because when I was president of my school's Pride Club, we tried to express that we do have a safe space for people of color, people of different sexuality, sexual orientation, gender identity. But the thing is, the message wasn't getting out. And it felt like we were being silenced when when people asked us our opinion. It was like they asked how we felt about it. And it was hard to keep like members in our group because parents were finding out, and like parents who were closed-minded, who didn't want their kids to come. And when like I told a faculty member about this, and they were like, really? But when I tried to explain more, they just kept saying, I see you're very passionate about this. But it wasn't like a compliment or anything. At first it might have been, but after it was like, I'm disregarding you right now. You're not interesting me whatsoever. But they were saying it so many times as I was actually talking about like the welfare and safety of one of their students. It was like, all right, doesn't even matter. And a bunch of kids at our school was like, I wish there was more inclusion. I wish there was more advocacy. And I'm just like, we have a Pride Club. I've been trying to get this out all the time. And our teachers were telling us to hold all our questions and comments to the end. And I was like, no, because I would end up having to only tell like somebody in the corner. And I know that wasn't gonna like be spread out or anything. So I just sat there with my hand up, stubborn to not let myself be silenced, saying, we have what you're asking for. You just need to find a way to get there. We have the opportunity. We have the means. We have a group. We just, apparently you guys never knew about it because it wasn't brought up a lot. And that was like very frustrating, because also going to the whole gender neutral bathroom thing, like the only ones that like we had were like one upstairs. It was like a loft for a bunch of classrooms, and it was only one. And then there was the nurse's office. But those 2 points are completely different on sides of the school, and having a means to get there, because you don't want to take 45 minutes, obviously exaggerated, to get to a bathroom just to go. Because if they can do it in public for like parents who have their children with them to change their diaper, they can do it for students. I mean, if they're being accessible to people who have handicap needs where they have a handicap bathroom stall, they can do that for LGBTQIA members who need it, you know?
Yeah, thank you, Delaney, for saying that. And I know that that's been, ongoing issues. I think there's even state legislation that's been, drafted to kind of require that, any public building, ensure that if they have a single-use restroom, it is designated as gender neutral. And if there is not a single-use restroom, any new construction, making sure that there are those available. I'd like to go ahead and, I see some of y'all's hands up, and we'll definitely have some more open time for questions. I am going to kind of move into our next question though. Actually talking a little bit about impactful teachers or school leaders. And so, looking to hear some stories on what are characteristics, qualities, or practices that have had a positive impact on your life. And again, this could be in school or maybe out of school. And so I think by highlighting those, hopefully we can get towards solutions. So Jaden, oh, I'm so sorry. I just realized Divine, you just joined us. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Divine, and your pronouns if you're comfortable?
Hey guys, my name is Divine Bay and I use she, her pronouns.
What county are you representing?
I'm from Baltimore City.
All right, Baltimore City Schools. I'll go ahead and I know you've been listening a little bit. Is there anything you wanted to kind of just chime in and say, before we head into the next question?
I'm still a little lost, so just give me some time to get caught up and I'm definitely going to jump in.
All right, all good. So Jaden, looking back on the question of an impactful teacher, school leader, or what are characteristics or qualities that have an impact and positive impact on LGBTQ youth? Did I say Jaden? Yes, I said Jaden. Is not here. Okay, great. So Vinny, actually, I'm curious if you had anything to share in relationship to that question.
Yes, of course I do. For me, a lot of a few staffs were very accepting of what my sexuality is and what I go by. And if anything, I could have just run to them about any situation that happened. And oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Okay. So yeah, and no, hold on, wait 1 second.
So you have a dog guest. While we wait for, oh, Vinny, you good?
So yeah, okay. So yeah, the teachers at my school, definitely love them so much. There are some that are a little iffy about it, ones that try to avoid it, ones that give the side eye or whatnot. And it happens to the best of us. It always happens to the best of us. For me, the teachers that I mainly go for would be my geometry teacher or my child development teacher. They are really sweet, nice, and understanding, especially my child development teacher, because she's still young, she still goes to school, she still does what we all do. And literally greatest thing is that whenever if I need a shoulder to cry on, I can go to them. If I have any issues that's happening, especially times that's happening right now, doing homophobia, racial stuff and all that stuff, it's kind of really hard to just keep in not keep in contact, but keep in a normal daily basis without having all those other stuff just pile up onto you. And so for me personally, I think that is just amazing because I have someone to speak with. I have people who understand. I have people who help out. I have people who are always free to talk to. And I understand a lot of people, some people may not have people to talk to, and at least that's what they think. Maybe you just right? So yeah, but even though you may not know anyone, literally anyone you find is the best way to just admit to what you're thinking of, or what's going on currently, or how you're feeling. Even if anyone asks, hey, how you doing, go off, just say what you need, because it's better that way. And I think that's it, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny, so much for sharing that. I think part of what you mentioned of kind of being taking the courage to actually sort of take advantage of resources or folks when they are available. What I'm also kind of sounds like it's really important that maybe every school really have sort of designated named individuals, right, who are available for that, to provide that kind of support or resource specifically for marginalized students. And so I think that what you kind of mentioned is really great, and something that could be worked to sort of fostered in every school, is to make sure that there are people that are sort of set up to be good resources. Before we move on, Michaela, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I kind of wanted to talk about a teacher who's been very like influential and kind of like what qualities she has that I feel like would be good. I have this teacher, she's the president of the SGA at my old middle school. I'm going to high school next year, so I'm kind of caught in the middle. So I had this teacher at my middle school who she was the leader of our GSA. She was very open, and I think a lot of it is like she was very much an ally, and she was very open to letting students know that she was on their side. She kind of, and so there's that. She was also very kind of judgment free. If you wanted to talk to her, you could talk to her. So that's something that you probably need. Someone who's very open, someone who's very judgment free, someone who's just kind of loving, kind, and open minded. I think that's really what she was, and I feel like that's what you need in a teacher or any really adult in a school who is going to help out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michaela. And I just want to sort of acknowledge quickly too, I see a lot of great comments in the chat from all of you about comprehensive sexuality education that's inclusive of LGBTQ plus identities. And so I'll definitely just kind of jump in and say that, in the state of Maryland, there's recommendations and guidance that's put out, but there's not necessarily sort of full adoption of inclusive curriculum in each of our schools. Additionally, from my understanding, it's fairly challenging to get teachers to be certified as health educators in our state, and that there is not necessarily, enough health educators in each state. And so, getting to a place where at least each school district, right, has a trained certified health educator that has curriculum and will be teaching curriculum that is inclusive of LGBTQ plus folks, I definitely think is, right up an easy way or sort of additional way, right, to create a safer environment and actually sort of train, or not train, but sort of teach all students, right, on LGBTQ plus identities. I'm going to move into our last question, and then we'll have a lot more sort of questions or we'll be opening up to questions that might come in. So as you all are very well aware on many, sort of state and national surveys, youth report disproportionate effects of discrimination on their mental health. I do also just want to acknowledge in the state of Maryland, last legislative session in 2021, we were actually successful in lowering the age of consent for mental health services from 15 to 12. So that is something that we're definitely really proud of, and research shows is really important, so students feel like they have a safe space to talk about identity related issues in a way that's not necessarily going to get back to caregivers. That being said, youth still say that cost is the #1 barrier to regular mental health resources. So even if they have the access, they're not necessarily going to be able to afford it. So I'm kind of curious for you all, how does LGBTQ plus youth access, how do you go about accessing these services or resources for your mental health? And what is it that needs to be improved? And what is it that schools can do, right? Schools, are definitely an entry point, but they're not necessarily the solution for everyone's mental health needs. So would love to kind of hear your ideas or thoughts on this issue. Alvaro, is there anything you have to say on this?
Yeah, so I think you brought up a really good point in terms of access. As we know, Maryland has a very diverse, I want to say, net income by household. It also greatly varies by county. I know my county, Prince George's County, is very varied. We'll have a high number of low-income families, but also a high number of middle-class families. But with that disparity, we see that all these students ultimately don't know the resources that are available to them, or just don't have access or resources laid out for them. And I think you brought up a really good point when it comes to like mental health professionals, whether it be a school psychologist or a mental health clinician. These resources for students, specifically when it comes to LGBTQ students who go through a lot of emotional distress and go through a lot of mental health problems. I think it'd be truly amazing if we had the state take more of a progressive action in terms of allotting these resources towards our counties. I know specifically in Prince George's County, we're able to lay out a plan where we require at least one mental health clinician in each of our high schools, middle schools, and we're slowly implementing them into our elementary schools. But given that access, that way our students don't have to go out of their way to go out and look for a therapist or a psychologist because it's in the school. And you brought up the age of consent, which I was truly excited about because most of the limitations when you see with that is that parents would have to get involved. And usually when it comes to LGBTQ students, you have a lot of kids who aren't really expressive of who they are, of their sexual orientation, their household. And so they're not able to really get or seek mental health resources because of the fear of being outed. And so, yeah, I think taking a more proactive approach in terms of extending resources and letting students know that the resources are there, because that's another problem, how we communicate what's there for students. But yeah, and I guess that's my approach when it comes to mental health that's being offered to students.
That's great. Thank you, Alvaro. Ari.
Agreeing with Alvaro, obviously, because Alvaro's amazing. But besides obviously like pretty much cracking down on harassment and discrimination regarding like anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and like behaviors, I feel like training teachers and counselors specifically to be available and to actually handle these situations of people being closeted and also just figuring out their sexuality or even their gender identity. Because I don't know about the rest of y'all, I can never get in contact with my counselor. It's literally insane. I will literally have to spam them repeatedly just to get a yes or no like answer for a yes or no question. It's that bad. So I feel like, I'm not sure if it's a matter of being understaffed. I think for our school it is, but I think we just need to do better regarding availability and availability of safe spaces, because sophomore year, I didn't know that we had a LGBTQ club, you know, like until sophomore year. I had no idea they existed. And even now, I'm still not even sure if they're running. But I hear nothing for safe spaces for people like us. And it's very problematic because when it comes to these lower income households, these kids can't really turn to these places where they need help for their mental health, especially if they're dealing with like homophobic rhetoric and transphobic rhetoric, whatever, in their households. So I just think that we really need to make safe spaces and then also broadcast those safe spaces, because if people don't know, then they're never going to be able to get the help they need.
Thank you, Ari. Divine, before we open it up to our viewer questions, I wanted to see if you just had any reflections. You know, before you jumped on, we were talking a little bit about bullying and school safety, and now we've sort of been talking about solutions to that. I was wondering if you had any insight or thoughts on either the problems or solutions for LGBTQ students.
I definitely have some insight. I was definitely one of the kids that was bullied in school for being trans and being tall and everything else. But one thing about me, I was very outspoken and I had a lot of people behind me. So we actually came up with a lot of solutions while I was still in school to prevent anything happening for children, like, and, you know, youth after I leave. So one of the things that we did create a safe space for queer youth within the nurse's office. They had like, in the nurse's office, they had like what they kind of used for like a counseling room, but like they didn't really use it for a counseling room. So we kind of created that space and we made it to where, like, you know, if somebody was having a bad day, if they weren't feeling good, if somebody was picking on them or anything at all. Like, they can come into this space and within the nurse's office where they also had the, the gender neutral bathrooms. And, they can come and calm down or talk to somebody if they need to. That was one thing that we had created. And then we also made sure that one of the biggest things that I noticed that needed to be in place when I was still in school was that staff didn't know how to handle situations and or staff didn't really know what to do or what was going on. They didn't know much about us, so they needed trainings. So definitely I feel like a big solution is making sure that all staff have trainings on how to handle certain situations, trainings on pronouns and things like that. So that was actually some stuff that we actually did at my school before I graduated.
Thank you so much, Divine, for sharing. And I like the literally having a physical safe space, I think is a great solution that makes complete sense. That, being very literal about having a safe space. Well, thank you all so much. I know we're going to kind of keep moving. I know that there's one question from Michaela for the superintendent, and then I'll see the superintendent if there's any other kind of questions you might have. But Michaela, do you have that question?
I do. Hold on a second. I'm pulling it up because I worded it right in the text. So my questions were, what are you specifically in this office, in the superintendent's office of the state, doing to help with these certain issues? And I guess my question was also, what did you hope to gain from this? But I think that was that was supposed to be in the beginning. So just my question is, after listening to all of this, what do you plan on intending doing, or if you have what you plan on doing with this information?
Yeah, so I don't think I can give you all the solutions now. I go to the airport and I get stopped by TSA still to this day for random checks. And so we live in a world that is still very challenging and messed up, and adults who sometimes, who are barely even learning basic concepts about, who is amongst us every day. And so, I wish I could just say all teachers need to be trained, and therefore they will make sure that they are ready to go. You can be trained and you could still not get it right? We have people who, there's a lot of equity, the word equity, I'm a little worried in this post-George Floyd world, it's becoming a performative act. And really versus good old fashioned civil rights work, we still have not even realized that work, right? You have issues around LGBTQ, and then you have issues even between race and class issues within even LGBTQ communities, right? And whose voices get lifted and what that looks like. For me, it was very important that this room today looked like the students of Maryland, right? So there's several things. Today, I wanted to just listen and hear what your experiences are. So I wanted to hear literally your personal stories. I wanted to hear how they were manifesting, right? And then ultimately, I wanted to see basically what are glimmers of hope? What are positive experiences that you're having? That's why that other question I specifically added, because we didn't have it originally. It was what are your teachers who you find to be rock stars, and what are they doing? And you guys put a lot of things in the chat that are very important. But one is making sure laws and regulations around discrimination, around race, class, gender, ability, sex are enforced. That's very important. And you do enter gray zones sometimes, and you got to figure that out. But I want you to know, yeah, you're go tell someone, but ultimately I don't want you to stop that. I need you to keep telling people. You need to tell someone, right? I know it's not always easy, but we don't know if you don't tell someone. And sometimes we have to learn things through tensions in this world. literally, if that means going out to the street and protesting and making people hear you loud and clear. And I just, you know, having organizations focused on this work, you know, Jeremy and his organization focus on this work, and they focus on at the state level in Annapolis. So I want you to make sure, know that the state board meets every month. Know we have a hybrid meeting. You know, you can sign up as students and share. We have a student board member that rotates every year. You know, they are supposed to represent you. They have voting rights. They have full voting rights. They evaluate me. And so, which is not common in all your local systems. So know that, don't forget that, advocate for, you know, policies in that way. You know, and then the other thing is I have the ability to work with all 24 school superintendents. So when I hear stories around, you know, no follow-up, a staff member not creating a safe, affirming, positive learning environment for you, and then you filed a complaint and nothing's happening, well, I'm going to push on them. I'm going to ask what's going on, what's happening there. And so one, I wanted to learn about your experiences. Two, what I know that I need to make sure to keep doing is continue to, Maryland does have progressive policies. It's not perfect. We do have a health framework, right? It's not perfect, but it's much better than a lot of other things. And let's continue to make it and making sure that's preserved, right? Because it's based on best-in-class research and practices. And then the last piece is, what are the new policies and new practices? What's the next frontier that needs to be done, right? And what does that look like? And, you know, there's this tension between local control as well as the state level mandate and what that looks like. And then lastly, I would say is, you know, your local school boards matter. So make sure you are passionate about that forum. Make sure people who enter that position understand that you are here to basically create learning environments for all students. And so you have my commitment there. I can't say what all the solutions are. I can't tell you what the perfect line is, right? In terms of policy, because you can write it, right? We have policies that say you cannot discriminate students based on race, class, and gender. And yet every day we see disparate impact of policy decisions playing out. So you know, the first thing I'm doing is, remember, this is the end of my first year. I'm still new to Maryland, but I wanted to take in what the current foundations or lack of foundations or the cracks are. The next piece is what is currently in our books. We have an equity policy that does recognize beyond race and class and gets into sex and transgender. So that's very important. There are obligations from me there to make sure I'm enforcing things. So making sure that has happened. And the next piece is solutions for the next frontier, teacher preparation, training. It was what I heard from a lot of you is I didn't hear from any of you like, those adults need to be super punished and you need to make sure that they are out of a job the next day. I didn't hear that from you, right? Whereas I hear some of that from adults, but I didn't hear that from you. Now, what I did hear is progressive discipline. And ultimately, if you can't change and you are set in your ways, then you cannot be a teacher, an adult or principal or superintendent who is for all kids. And that's what our school systems will be. And it's important that we ensure that. So I appreciate you giving me the time. And Jeremy, I mean, those are my thoughts for today.
Great, thank you so much, Superintendent. And just wanted to say a quick thank you to Dean, Stephanie, and Steve for your comments on YouTube. Definitely in agreement that really students should not be the burden of finding or creating safe spaces in our school. And it's really important for us as adults and allies to really support our youth. And so just wanted to say, thank you all so much for joining today. I know the conversation definitely doesn't end here. I've already shared my contact information. I'm more than happy to have these additional conversations offline. As a reminder, Free State Justice is a statewide legal services and policy advocacy nonprofit. So we do provide direct client legal services to low-income LGBTQ plus Marylanders. That includes youth. We provide free gender marker name changes. We provide free support services for victims, whether it's discrimination or violence. And moving forward under the Inclusive Schools Act, we'll definitely be able to provide additional support when you are having these issues of bias or discrimination in your school. So, I'm really hopeful that moving forward, you'll consider our legal team as a resource to help you out if you don't feel like you're getting traction or you feel like you're being heard from your schools or from the environments that you're in. The last thing I'm going to ask for everyone to do as well, both all of you here as well as those watching, to please complete the strategic planning survey for Maryland Public Schools. This is at marylandpublicschools.org/survey. There'll be a post link to this in the chats. Please make sure to fill it out and share it with all your communities. And again, thank you all for joining us tonight. We look forward to the future, working collaboratively with all of you, and really make sure that all students across the state can feel safe. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
bud.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, if that's okay. Can you put your email to reach you, Superintendent?
Yeah, sure. I wasn't sure who you were talking to because you guys were talking to each other. I'm like,
There's a lot of people.
I was like, I'm the boring adult in the room, so I wasn't sure. All right, let me do that right now. Maryland.gov.
And all of us can email you, right?
Of course you can email me. People email me all day, every day. I get emails all the time. So it's Maryland, it's Mohammed.Choudhury. You can see it right there at maryland.gov. I think I got that right. Yep. Do you see it?
Yes. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Of course, please shoot ideas, shoot policies. And, we are we have a lot of work to do, but Maryland is further ahead than other places, but the adults living in Maryland may not be where they need to be, everyone. And so I hear you loud and clear, and good to see you again, Delaney. I think I saw you at Washington County when we did the apprenticeship. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you got back to me. I was like thinking, did I write my email wrong or something like that? Because I didn't check it until it was the day before yesterday. And I was just like, oh, wait a minute, here it is. And I'm really glad because that consistency, that was what I was really happy about, of you actually kept your promise of saying, we will not ignore you, we will actually reach you. And that actually means a lot to me, more than what the other schools and teachers have ever done, which I really appreciate.
I appreciate that, and I hope to go to the next level. It's not enough just to listen. In a position like this, I also have to act. So I really appreciate you guys with the tough question, especially you, Jaden. Thank you for putting me on the spot. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.